Yes, sir.
Can I move up? I have moved up a little bit. Am I okay? Can I move again? Should I move again?
No, all right, it comes up.
Okay. Where's the guest that I was told is here? Oh. We're going to go in how did I put this thing? Organizational renewal, communications, the battle of ideas, peace and stability, foreign policy, social transformation, economic transformation will be the last one, because although we don't know, we take calls, the callers might call and talk about
something else.
Economic transformation, whilst we are not there yet. But anyway, we'll take it as it comes.
As it comes, okay. But there was not much into their resolution.
Sorry?
I'm saying there was not much into their resolutions. There's more of infighting.
Thank you, Anthony. It's 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional, human rights and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumila Mateza. And remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by calling us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. The ANC National Policy Conference has come and gone. However, there are still more unanswered questions. One of the questions is whether the ANC came out of this conference united as previously predicted. If you take into account that the stalwarts and veterans boycotted the event in protest, there is still no real strategy to deal with corruption, state capture, and just sheer incompetence in the implementation of past policies. It would, however, seem that the delegates were preoccupied with leadership tussle more than anything else. This conference was also seen as a watershed conference reminiscent of the Morogoro Consultative Conference in 1969 and the Kabul Conference in 1985, which begs the question, quo vadis ANC? Today on Rights and Recourse, we are conducting a post-mortem of the conference and the way forward. But first, let's have a look at this insert.
The ANC survived for a century because of, amongst others, the following traits: its deep roots and connection with the people, its vibrant internal democracy and collective leadership, its readiness and willingness of its members to make sacrifices in pursuit of the cause of the people as a whole, its readiness to acknowledge its weaknesses and decisively address them in order to escalate and accelerate the people's struggle, its ability to adapt to changing conditions and rise to the occasion at critical moments, and its ability to uphold and build unity across sections of South Africans and progressive forces in the world in pursuit of the cause of humanity. We need to restore these traits as they have made the ANC a parliament of the people.
Well, to discuss today's topic, we are joined in the studio by political analyst Mr. Botsang Milwa, and from our Pretoria studio by Dr. Somadoda Fikeni, and later we'll be joined by Mr. Mpumelelo Mkhabela, Fellow of the University of Pretoria Center for the Study of Governance Innovation. Gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Let me start with you, Dr. Fikeni. Everything the President said there is the opposite of what we have come to know the ANC for. President speaks about this century-old organization as deep-rooted and connection with the people, and internal democracy, a cause for the people as a whole. They're fighting a cause for the people as a whole. Sacrifices in pursuit of the people as a whole. And the ability to adapt to changing conditions. We have seen over the last couple of days that the ANC has actually warned MPs who are likely to use that democracy to vote with their consciences in the vote of no confidence that is planned by Parliament, and a whole lot of other things which we can talk to as we go along.
Well, ironically, I would simply say that the year that Tambo is being remembered, he is the longest serving ANC president who has confronted several challenges. Among those, he responded by allowing Morogoro Conference to reflect and turn the situation around in the late 60s into the 70s. He again faced another crisis in the mid-80s. Hence, the Kabwe Conference was arranged. In all those, ANC emerged stronger with a clear strategic focus and strong leadership. But the same cannot be said of the current situation, precisely because ANC refused to reflect honestly and introspect brutally on the crisis it is facing internally, at the very soul of the organization. And the starting of the conference itself didn't actually go well because the diagnostics report from the company, from the secretary of the organization, Gwede Mantashe, was again debated as to whether it should be presented or not, and the signs of factional reflexes were already very strong at that particular point as to which report are we going to look at or not, even if it helps us to reflect on the issues that ANC ought to have sorted. And secondly, the fact that the veterans were not allowed the opportunity to co-create and shape the agenda leading to the conference created an impression amongst them that not only the current leadership is more interested in self-defense. ANC had now been consumed by navel gazing of looking internally on its challenges without much attention on the societal crisis that is deepening. So this was a lost opportunity in many ways, because ANC ought to have used creatively and imaginatively the initial period where they ought to have been meeting with the veterans to reflect on its crisis. But more importantly, at this moment, I don't even think the most pressing problem of the ANC is the policies that they keep churning out, but rather a reflection as to why most of ANC policies hardly ever see 5 years of implementation, and they fade away. RDP, GEAR, GIPSA, ASGISA, New Growth Path, you mentioned them, the New Development Plan. And now we do have the radical economic transformation, all those have implementation challenge. That's what ANC ought to have focused on. Also on corruption, which has now started to blunt any instrument that ANC has as a capacity to implement and lead the society.
We are joined by Mr. Mpumelelo Mkhabela from the University of Pretoria. First, let me ask you, Botsang. The ANC says, the president said there that the ANC has the ability to adapt to changing conditions. And many people are asking, in the very first document, the Organizational Renewal and Design document, the ANC says the ANC must retain its dual character as a liberation movement and a political party. Surely you can't.
Well, good afternoon, Dumile, and good afternoon to the SABC viewers. Absolutely and definitely, you cannot conduct yourself in a manner you conducted yourself in the first years of governing, moving from a liberation movement to a political party. Politics have evolved and matured in the country. The African National Congress itself, as a political party today, cannot be expected to behave and conduct and handle matters the way they were handled as a liberation movement. Indeed, the country is not yet completely liberated. The economic sector is still in the hands of the minority. They still have to play a liberation role, but not a guerrilla liberation role whereby they are opposing a sitting government. They are a sitting government. They're supposed to play that final leg of liberating the people of South Africa from the parliamentary seats, from the government position. But I was also listening to Dr. Somadoda Fikeni mentioning that they missed an opportunity during this time. My observation is this policy conference, actually, it ended up being a platform that was used by delegates to show on which side they are trying to influence the policies of. And we should not, shy from saying, at the moment, the country is very clear that you've got two contesting delegates who are up front, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini as well as Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, who happens to be the deputy president of the country and the party. If you looked at what happened in Nasrec, people were pushing their line and policies along the language of who they favor, who they want to be elected in December. Where they failed dismally was to reflect on the policies which the ANC adopted in the last 20 years. Every 5 years they've been adopting, as the doctor had said, different policies. They failed to reflect on whether those policies were successful, what went wrong, and what needed to be corrected if it went wrong. Coming with new things is not going to help. We wasted a lot of time trying to analyze whether there is radical economic transformation, whether there is white monopoly capital, and so forth. Again, it looks like the people at the conference went there without knowing the policies of their own organization, without knowing the standpoint of their own organization, and it's a missed opportunity. However, we sit and hope as a nation that coming the December conference, all these errors that happened during the policy conference will be corrected, but on one condition, to Mile. If there is unity in the ruling party, if there is cohesion in the ruling party, that is possible.
Mr. Mkhabela, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Many people have referred, many other analysts have referred to this conference as a watershed conference. I said that at the beginning. And many people say it was reminiscent to the Morogoro conference, consultative conference, and the Kabwe consultative conference in 1985. But unfortunately, many people are saying going into the Morogoro conference, there was unity in purpose. There was no unity in purpose in this conference.
No, there wasn't at all. And it would have been had the ANC leadership accepted the request of the veterans to have a proper consultative conference. It would have been, it would have taken the same, magnitude and perhaps with the same purpose to reform the ANC like those two conferences we have mentioned. But unfortunately, in this case, the reason why it was not like that was because there was no agreement in the first place as to what actually are the problems facing the ANC. All the ANC leaders will tell you that the ANC has got problems. But if you ask them what actually is the problem, it's always almost as if the problem is with someone else. Someone else is causing the problem. If it's the president speaking, he points to some...
the security cluster would want you to believe.
Yes, the president will point to other people. The Secretary General will point to other people. Everybody is pointing to someone else out there. There was no introspection to say, actually, we are the problem as the leadership, and we need assistance. here's an opportunity where we're going to be in a gathering together with branches from all over the country. We need to hear them out. What are their perspectives? Let's open up. But if you start by setting a tone that says there's nothing wrong with us, there's a problem somewhere, the movement is under attack from other mysterious forces, from the West, Western countries, from NGOs, from the Fallist movement in South Africa, which is conniving with the West to overthrow them. Once you start like that, the membership is also thinking, well, our movement is under attack from other forces. And then you miss the opportunity to deal with the internal problems. So as far as I'm concerned, the leadership of the ANC, it's the problem. But you wouldn't expect, obviously, the patient to diagnose himself or herself. So you need a bit of humility on the part of the ANC leadership to listen to the voices we are pointing out to from society to say, what are they saying about us? Are we prepared to administer the drugs?
Well, it's only Jesus Christ who said, what are they saying about me? Professor, let me go back to Dr. Sobadudafike, and he raised something that I found a little bit profound, which I picked up in the Sunday Times this morning. The Sunday Times reports this morning that if the ANC is to continue running South Africa beyond the current term of government, it may be the right time to examine the efficacy of its policy formulation processes. I did put this question to Mr. Jeff Hadebe, who is the head of policy, and he actually tried to answer the question. Prof, Dr. Figure, you did allude to a statement like this in your response.
Certainly, I do think that ANC and South Africa's problem might not even be the policies in essence. We do have some of very good policies, and we do have a constitution that makes provisions for some of the transformative agenda that we want to have. But the biggest problem here is that each time we are coming closer to elections or to elective conferences, we ratchet up the rhetoric, we come up with new policy refurbishments, and we know that we are not going to see them through. And yet the political cost of policy instability and uncertainty goes way beyond just the expediency of using them. The first one is the problem of South Africa might not even be the three challenges that ANC often cite: inequality, poverty, and unemployment, because it might be that the cancer of corruption is the one that has actually contributed to the worsening of these problems. You can't have the right people deployed in a patronage system, because you have to look for people who are loyal rather than people who are competent. At the same time, the policy turnover makes sure that no one becomes an expert in anything, because once you have workshops, you are ready to understand this policy, it is gone. Then the change of a minister might lead to a change of the policy, the strategy, by the same political party. So over the years, ANC's capacity to see policies through and see their impact is simply not there, because there might be lack of conviction. Take RDP. RDP had so many positive things in it, and yet within a space of 3-4 years it faded away. Take the new growth path. You can talk of even the new National Development Plan. Less emphasis is being placed on that. So we ought to be saying the leadership capacity, as well as the ANC capacity and the government capacity to implement the policies, even at a minimum level of the existing policies, rather than starting new debates all the time when there is a policy conference.
You wanted to say something, Bhutan.
I wanted to come in regarding the veterans to say opportunity was being missed. You know, there's two elements that I've heard them. One, we should not actually bypass the fact that an opportunity was created, according to the Secretary General of the ANC, for the 101 veterans. You know, I have to be specific, and I'll tell you why. For them to be met 2 days during the policy conference or prior to the policy conference. However, they did not meet what they had expected. They wanted a totally separate conference. So we should mention that. But also, Dumile, veterans in the African National Congress, they include quite a number of people which are not only 101 leaders who have come up. You have veterans like Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, who stood up through the current crisis of the leadership of the ANC, was there, participated within the conference of the ruling party. And I was asking myself, sitting there looking at Winnie Mandela, trying to bring all these forces together to say, why didn't these other 101 veterans, Zuma himself, he's a veteran of the ANC, you know, why all this 101 and others who are silent at the moment, couldn't they do or help what Winnie Mandela was trying to do? I wanted to clear that part.
I think the veterans, to be fair on them, is that they wanted, let us wait with policy formulation. We cannot have policy formulation in chaos.
When there's chaos, yeah. But I wanted to go back to the policy part, as Dr. Fikeni had said. As much as we all agree that the ANC over the years has, and it didn't start now with the Zuma administration, even Mandela, even Mbeki administration, they've always had good policies. The problem is not even only changing leadership, because Mandela administration changed leadership, Mbeki administration changed leadership. The problem is lack of a drive to implement these good policies. When these ministers and MPs get into power and sit in those comfortable chairs, I don't know what happens to the drive they had when they formulated those policies, because implementation of these good policies, that's what lacked in government. There may be various reasons. Lack of willpower, corruption is definitely a contributing factor. For, you know, once you are corrupt, you won't be able to implement the policy as agreed.
Let's hear from Mpumelelo on this issue of the fact that the veterans were actually saying there is no way we can have a constructive policy conference with all of these things that are happening around us.
Well, yes, indeed, because you see, if we have a policy conference under the current climate, whatever decisions or debates that happen in that policy conference, all of those things are tainted by what the veterans would like to change, which is the character of the leadership of the ANC. They want an understanding that the current leadership of the ANC lacks the moral gravitas, it lacks the intellectual capacity to even stand in front of the Republic of South Africa and say, we are the leaders of this country, we deserve respect. So until you clear that out, any decision, any debate is inevitably clouded by the controversy of the very same lack of integrity on the part of the leadership. So that's why they wanted to clear that part, so before any other conference can take place. And in that fashion, it would have taken the Kabwe format. But I want to come to the issue of why then, as my colleague says, the ANC lacks the capacity to implement policies. And I think Dr. Fikeni also points to the same thing. Why then do we have that problem, despite the rhetorical commitment on the part of the leadership of the ANC? All the time they meet, we'll implement, we'll fix, we'll do that, but nothing happens. Boils down to
it's a similar thing to what confused me after the local government elections,
yes,
when the ANC said, we will go to our people and listen to them. But then they closed this argument with the words, we will self-correct.
Well, in that case, even before we went to the municipal elections in August last year, the ANC did its own study, and the diagnostic report points to that study. They knew exactly before that election what were the issues that South Africans were worried about in relation to the ANC. Nkandla was pointed out, and many other similar issues. And yet nothing was done. When they consulted the branches afterwards, the branches told them the same thing, but nothing happened after that. So the veterans are saying, but having failed to do anything about problems that we are aware of, what hope can you actually bring to the people in a policy conference environment? So the point I want to make also is that the ANC at the moment, it's denuded of capacity to do anything. And as a result, you can't, as a political party, if you can't govern yourself ethically, you can't govern the country ethically. It's impossible, because what happens within the political party structure, you would have expected it to actually move to government side if you are in a government position. The NDP talks about, for example, building a capable state. I would have liked to see how the policy,
public service.
Yes, how the policy conference would have reported to say, this is how far we are in building the capable state in the light of the crisis that we know is crippling the criminal justice system in South Africa. The indecisiveness at the NPA, the lack of leadership in the SAPS. We know that even at IPIT level, there's been a lot of drama there with cabinet ministers trying to disrupt the workings of the IPIT. So I would have liked to know from that point of view, how are we building a capable crime-fighting machinery as part of the... Now we're having break-ins at state security institutions.
Including the Chief Justice's
Yes. How does that help build a capable state?
Well, let's take this call from Dougie from the Vaal. He's fishing on the Vaal River. Dougie, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
How are you? I haven't spoken to you guys for a long time. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Dougie.
Listen, I agree with all three of your speakers today. All three are excellent speakers and all three are making sense. The biggest problem you got, you're sitting with a president who wants to be another Robert Mugabe. That's what the problem is. He wants to be Robert Mugabe because he's coming with other stories. And he's giving the nonsense, he's talking the nonsense to people that do not understand or listen or whatever. It's young people they're talking to. And they're not talking to the older people. The older people, you know, it reminds me of what the Bible tells me.
Ah, Dougie, if you're going to go there...
No, I just want to give a quote out there. I don't want to give you...
No, give us a quote.
I just want to give you a story. It says, when Solomon's two sons took over, the one son went to Syria. The other son ruled dinners. And he wouldn't listen to the elders. Hello?
Yes, Dougie, we're still here. We understand. Thank you, Dougie. Thank you, Dougie. We can hear you. We are going to be discussing what you are telling us when we come back from a break. If you'd like to join us as Dougie did on today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498 or tweet us at Rights Recourse. Alternatively, you can send us an email to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. When we come back, we'll touch on some of the policy documents that were discussed last weekend. When I interrupted you about Jesus saying, what are they saying about me?
Yeah, and now he's taking you on with the
yeah. Okay, we must listen to this upsound clip, guys, that is coming up so that we can talk about it. I think it's Nechitenza, so we must go.
Our relationship to monopoly capital is one of cooperation where there are common interests and contestation where there might be divergences. We want them to create jobs. We want them to invest. We want them to bring technology into the country. We want them to participate in black economic empowerment. And to that extent, there will be cooperation. But there are challenges to do with conduct, terms of pricing, in terms of collusion. There are challenges also to do with the pace at which some of them are transforming. There are challenges that would apply to matters to do with how some of them respond to government policy and how those government policies may relate to their interests.
Well, but Joel Netshitenzhe was giving a report from one of the commissions, and many papers, there's been views that probably you can start, Dr. Fikendi, that Joel Netshitenzhe misrepresented the commission in which he served in his reporting.
Well, I do know that one thing that was disconcerting about the conference itself was the fact that the factions were generous to contribute some of the views of what was happening inside with the aim of shaping the reporting on the issues. Because ultimately what Joel Netshitenzhe said during the media briefing and what was summarized in the plenary and by the president were no different, but you could see here that the contestation to win the hearts and minds of people, what is leaked and what is not leaked and so forth, was still a reflection of factions positioning themselves rather than an honest reflection on what is happening. I do think that one very basic thing that shows the moral decay of any organization is something such as the reports that we're getting on the state capture on the emails. Any organization self-respecting would have just been up and they would have moved decisively. But because these are seen to be close to this or that faction, they are not able to, transcend these in order to correct. Just like going to the local government elections, we did signal to the ANC that its failure to self-correct was going to lead to its decline in the metros. And indeed, that is what turned out to be the case. One problem, though, that we should be looking at, when you do have a leadership, and in this case, the president, investing more energies on his survival and self-preservation, he is left with very little mind space to reflect on the legacy he may leave, on the bigger picture of how to save the organization. And this might also be compounded by the fact that his intelligence background in exile would have worked on an assumption during those difficult conditions that there is an enemy out there, there is a conspiracy there, and people have to prove themselves innocent, rather than to take them as being honest in their own articulations, rather than seeing a plot somewhere. And this has degenerated to a point where rubbishing of veterans is tolerated, and yet the organization could still be saying we are a disciplined organization, and at times leaders speaking at variance to the position of the organization. Once you apply discipline inconsistently, then nothing can work.
Mr. Mkhabela, I got a summary of what was discussed at the conference. One of them is the South African economy can be improved by credible programs of employment, creation, and radical transformation. Investor confidence will be boosted if the rising national debt is brought under control. If South Africa maintains its investment grade credit rating, there is nothing different from what Joel Netshitenzhe was saying.
Yes, but they won't say what led to the credit rating downgrade and how it should be reversed. And by the way, there's not even an agreement in the ANC what led to the downgrade. It depends on which faction you are speaking to. If you are speaking to the faction from KwaZulu-Natal, they tell you, no, the downgrades have nothing to do with the dismissal of Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. No, it has got to do with other factors. But if you don't acknowledge the problems, the destabilization that the president caused in the manner in which he changed cabinet, then you can't fix the problem. Now, the other thing about the economy is that the ANC is not short of advice on that, because rating agencies don't just downgrade. They offer an explanation. They even offer solutions on how to get out of it. The IMF recently also released a report, again, criticizing the way South Africa's economy is going, but also offering some way out. And by the way, the ANC government, that is the Treasury, has some ideas on how to get out of this. And they've been talking about so-called fiscal consolidation, which means you align your expenditure with growth and you manage your debt reasonably well so that you have your good credit rating in the market, you can go borrow.
I want to bring in Butsang. Butsang, I want you to take this question, your comment with this question from Mavala from the Eastern Cape.
Yeah.
Mavala, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon, Butumza.
Yes, Mavala.
I'm fine. I don't know if the analyst there can help us predict the future of President Zuma as the president of the ANC in the country, as from after the conference up to the election. Is he still going to be there? And again, there's this bad things are happening now. The Gupta leaks email, I think they have an impact on the conference. Everything about the Guptas, Mr. Dumba, is just that the ANC is involved in two factions. And in my predictions, I think they are heading for a split after December. And that's why the president of the conference said, no, the one who lost then must come and be the deputy. He was trying to see that there will be a split, but he's just doing it for his faction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavala. Butsang, you heard what Mavala said, and he's asking whether the president is going to be around. A day in a politician's life is a long time.
Mavala is trying to make analysts to be sangomas now. We should predict. But on a serious note, we all know that the determination of the leadership of the ANC, it's said and mainly been done from the branch level, you know. And I've been saying to people, I don't think the ANC will go through the mistake they made before and repeat by recalling the former President Thabo Mbeki. If a political party that is in power recalls two presidents at a short space of time, in politics 10 to 15 years is a short space of time. Everything takes too long to unfold and policies to be implemented. I do not think they want to go that route. They will go that route. That's one element. The second element is, I have observed how President Zuma has been working, and one of the speakers here had said, he is actually focusing on solidifying his power on the ground. Definitely has been doing that. If I was sitting in his position and there are all these threats coming my way, I was not going to sit and pay attention at the political conference because you've got lieutenants who can handle that. He has been working on the ground with the branches to solidify his position. And that's why people are talking about
factions. How the branches listen to that?
Well, if you look at the response he has been getting, and the response, we look at the numbers that he can pull into, you know, rallies and all those things. We look at what
rallies
transpired.
Not necessarily made up of branches.
But we look at what transpired. The people who were the 2,500 ANC branch leaders, plus another 1,000 business people and activists who were in Nasrec. If you look at how the influence was going, Dr. Somadoda Fikeni was talking about how the people inside the commission, where the media was bad, they had the privilege of leaking information to us. We were knowing what was going inside before the press briefing because people were leaking information. But that brought the situation of Mr. Joel Netitenze. That's what exposed that. It was leaking of information. You know, and when he was talking, and I've heard Ali saying, it is not the same language. For the man on the ground, Dumile, for the people who were in that hall, the language was different. We sit as experts, as analysts, and we say, they are talking the same thing, these people. But when you talk to the people who were inside those halls, they wanted to hear the words white monopoly capital. They wanted to hear the words uttered by Mr. Netitenze, what they used inside the discussion in the commissions. And that did not happen. And to solidify that, or to confirm that, when he went back to the commission, he was told, but this is not what was decided. And the steering committee as well went on and endorsed the laments of the people who were sitting there. So we cannot come and say he was talking the same language. As experts, as people on another level, yes, it sounds the same. These leaders of the ANC are not talking a different language. But you appease, you know, politics in South Africa are about numbers. You appease those numbers that are filling the world. Those are the same numbers that will go to the Congress in December and say, our leaders stood by us and stood by our decision. Whether it's the same language, it's semantics. It's English in this case.
I hear you, Butsang. I want to go back to Dr. Fikeni. Dr. Fikeni, one of the problems I've been sitting with, policies can only find expression when the executive presents legislation in Parliament And by the time that legislation is presented in Parliament, or by the time policies become legislation, they've been watered down completely. They are no more what they were at the policy conference.
That's one of the many challenges of how ANC as a governing party aligns its own policy intentions to the value chain of policy development up to implementation. But not only that, you will find that the other challenge in South Africa, which I've been highlighting for years, is that whatever ANC comes up with the priorities that it has, like it had the 5 priorities, rural development and many others, Treasury has a different technocratic approach where you find that even when there is a seismic shift in the strategy of the country, the fiscal position as well as the Treasury budgeting process and the resources allocated to those new priorities is often not forthcoming. We do have, to a large extent, a Treasury-driven economy rather than a strategy-driven economy in some respects. And ANC has to deal with this structural problem. And the next one, and the last one I want to say, is the fact that there is no coordination of various initiatives that are there. For example, there was a great deal of excitement when the president said he was introducing a performance management system with performance agreement with the ministers. But without consequence management and without any logic to which minister is performing, and these are the consequences, which minister is not performing, and these are the consequences and the incentives for those which are performing. For example, the recent cabinet reshuffle, some of the obvious candidates for reshuffle remained. And what was the determination? In the main, it is loyalty rather than excellence and performance.
Let me, before I come to you, Mpumelelo, I want to go to Gift in the Eastern Cape. Gift, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Hello, Putumil, how are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Gift?
I'm fine, thanks. Putumil, just a quick comment on I just want to agree first. I've got a comment and a question. I just want to agree with one of your panelists, Mr. Mkabela, if I pronounce correctly. You see, Mr. President, now he's saying the one that is going to be the one that he can, the one that is going to lose on the national conference in December. He or she must come. She must be deputy president. He can see that now the faction of Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is going stronger and stronger, because now they see what is going on. Now you want someone that is going to cover him where he is no longer a president. You understand? And my question now is going to be, I just want to pose one question to your analyst, Mr. Botang, if I pronounce well. If he's saying Mr. Zuma is a veteran, how come he attacks a 101 stalwart veteran like that?
Thank you, Gift. I want to go back. I want to stay. It looks like our discussion will remain around the economic issues. Mr. Mkabela, the document, the summary of what was discussed, comes out and saying, I'm responding to what Butang was saying, dismantling monopoly practices and structures. It doesn't say white monopoly. Dismantling monopoly practices and structures, strict enforcement of competition legislation aimed at stamping out monopolistic practices is required. Price fixing and other anti-competitive practices should be stamped out throughout the economy. The ANC should mandate a detailed investigation into the underlying structure of the economy in order to recommend ways to reduce and remove barriers to entry and dismantle monopolistic and oligopolistic structures in certain key factors. That is what came out of that, of that conference.
Yeah, well, it actually speaks to the conventional role of the state in a capitalist economy, which is to regulate, supervise, and make sure that those who hold dominant power within the economy don't abuse that power. It speaks to exactly what Joel was talking about, that monopoly capital shouldn't be declared an enemy of the people, as it has been with some of the factions saying that it's the enemy of the people. Because once you say it's the enemy of the people, then the ultimate goal must be to destroy it. So the question is, how do you say monopoly capital, you are the enemy, but please invest, create jobs? How do you say monopoly capital, you are the enemy of the people, but we want you to use your global alliances in the global economy to bring much needed skills and much needed technology and much needed finance to finance some of your projects and your investments in South Africa? How can they do that when you describe them as the enemy? Once the enemy, you have to destroy it. So I think what that says, it doesn't really say, there's nothing revolutionary about it. There's nothing new that the ANC is saying there. It's merely saying that, well, you know, the state will continue to be the regulator. We know we've got a competition commission that has been busting some of these cartels, some of this price fixing, collusion in the economy and all of that. But I don't see anything new. And it's typical of the ANC, whenever they don't have a solution, whenever they're stuck on a problem, they say, oh, let's investigate. Either there's a task team, there's a ministerial task team, there's a research or something like that. And usually when these things come back, nothing happens after that. So, in fact, the best way to actually deal with monopoly capital is to actually facilitate the entry of new businesses in the economy. Business people complain that the government doesn't make it easy for them. So it's not a question of monopoly capital alone. It's a question of the government's own regulations. Don't make it easy for people to start businesses. Don't make it easy for people. I mean, there was a story recently in the Free State where it took about 4 to 5 years for the Life Healthcare Group to get approval to build a hospital when they were going to create jobs. And the approval sat with the municipality of Mangaung. Now, you can't blame monopoly capital for failing to zone the land and get approval for something to be built. So you find a lot of these blockages in municipalities, in provinces, at national level. Businesses complain that they're not getting the kind of assistance they need. And for as long as people struggle to set up businesses, then the existing businesses will continue to dominate.
Well, there's another thing, Botsang, I'm sorry you wanted to say that, but I want to put this question to you. There was a faction in the ANC, there's still a faction that dismisses credit ratings agencies. And the ANC says about credit ratings agencies, recent downgrades by international ratings agencies provide a clear signal that the country is going to have to pull together like never before to overcome its economic problems. A credit rating being a measure of how likely the country will be able to repay its loans in full is not an unimportant indicator of the state of the economy.
Well, what the ANC is doing is they are acknowledging with this report, as you had mentioned earlier on, some of these reports of rating agencies, they come with recommendations. But to me, we should not put a blind eye on two important factors. I don't know why people are shying to call the monopoly capital in South Africa a white monopoly capital. And what makes it white, it's definitely and absolutely the dominance and the ownership of the economy and the resources of this country by white people. That's a fact. That's something we cannot shy away from. But having had or said that, we cannot also put a blind eye on the fact that the government is dismally failing, as he had said, to give opportunities to new entrants in the market in the form of black people, except in small businesses, but not in major, manufacturing businesses. And that's where the problem is. You look at who does business with government, auditing firms that government are using, including the treasury itself that is supposed to be leading or driving. You look at companies that they are using. That is the problem within government. They didn't create that opportunity. But what happened and what went wrong initially was to try.
Even those who profess to be fighting for
even those who are
talking invited, for instance, the Guptas use KPMG.
But all government departments and people who are doing business with government, they're still doing business. You look at the construction companies, but we should not also forget that.
Let me extend. Let me develop this idea further. Dr. Fikeni, because I'm chasing time, Dr. Fikeni, when the ANC started, it created Tebe Investment, and there was Jonic Investment Company, of which Cyril Ramaphosa was the chairman. Where is the succession plan to all of those things that were created by the ANC when it came into power?
Well, there seemed to be no continuity and clear planning, because once ANC started to allow factionalization, it became a matter of changing the guard. Whenever you have this change, it becomes, it's our turn to access the resources. And the previous business people then are seen with great suspicion that they were aligned either to Thabo Mbeki. And you are going to see more or less the same thing. And that is not the best way of creating a solid black business class, because there you must have consistency. You will have invested monies. Even in the unbundling of some of the state entities, you want to consciously and concertedly create this particular class. But again, being lukewarm about this thing one day, saying, I don't want any business class because it's part of capitalism in some sections of this discourse. But at the same time, you say, I want business empowerment. But ultimately, though, in a corrupt environment where the psychology of stealing is pervasive, patronage is pervasive, you may come with all these best ideas, but nothing is seen honestly as a development of a business long term. It is, where am I positioned when I give this?
I want to come back to something. I know, Mr. Kabela, you are burning to say something, but I want to stick with my friend here, Botsang, because I've interrupted him a number of times. There's been a faction that talks about a black bank. We've been waiting for, I don't know how many years, for the post office bank to be given a license.
I haven't picked up the black bank, and I don't think it will be correct to talk the black bank. We know that the banks in South Africa are white-owned and most are foreign-owned. What we should be talking about as a nation
is a development bank
or a state bank. Well, African bank is white-owned.
No, we had African bank. It was in black hands.
Well, the management administration, but you should look at the ownership of these banks. We can sit and say it was an African bank with leadership, but the ownership. What we should be talking
Mr.
about
Milwa, at
as
some
a nation.
stage, Mr. Milwa, I'm sorry, I can't allow you to get away with it. At some stage, the CEO of the African bank was Gabi Mahomula.
I agree with that, Dumi, but I am saying being a CEO of a company, you're not the owner of the company.
No, but the majority of people who worked for the African bank then were black.
But who are the shareholders? That's what we should be focusing on.
The shareholders were black.
What do we need as a majority? We need a state-owned bank. We need a central bank, and people should differentiate between a state-owned developmental bank and the reserve bank. Those are two separate things. We need a state-owned developmental bank that is going to help black people who are not having the privilege that white people have had, that they from
somebody would say, do we have the IDC?
Well, the IDC is not a bank. It does not have the credibility or the status that a commercial bank has. We don't have that. We don't have a bank where if a young black business person wants to go and challenge these construction companies or these cartels that we spoke about earlier on, can say, I want to compete with these people, but I don't have the capital. I've got the skills, I can create employment. We need a bank that will help these people to come up and compete at the same level. At the moment, the creation of Nail and Jonic and all that, we were not competing with the previously privileged white people on the same platform. That's why they're still beating the system, because the turf is not level. The turf is not the same. The land ownership
we're quickly running out of time, Mr. Milwa. Mr. Mkabela, I've been studying over the last couple of weeks, and I've asked these questions of a number of people, the history of the Afrikaner Broederbond. And I admire the way they went about creating and empowering their people. At some stage, they had a congress, a business congress, where they were saying, how can we get involved in business? They got a stake from Anglo-American, they formed GENCO, and from there they flew. Why can't we do the same?
Well, it's a very important question, because the whole thing started during the government of Jan Smuts, who set up ISCO, set up ESCOM, set up IDC, because they had a clear plan that they wanted to industrialize, and that industrialization would then empower Afrikaners. But the way they did it, they got people who were experts One of the guys that they brought from, I think he was in the US, he was an engineer guy, he was not in politics, was Van der Bijl. Today we've got Van der Bijl Park named after him, where ArcelorMittal is. Yes. So they got the guy, he was not involved in politics, he was an industrialist. They said, build this factory. But during that process, they realized that they also needed finance. Then he set up the ITC and all of that. Today, we have got Transnet, we've got ESCOM, we've got all of this, which are now in the new democratic government. They are now having to be used to benefit all South Africans, not like the old regime. So now, here's the question. Why is it difficult, now that we've got the rolling stock of PRASA and Transnet, it's old, it needs to be replaced. Why is it difficult for the government to insist that there has to be factories in South Africa which are going to produce these new coaches, to produce these new rail networks to Richards Bay and source, all the other sites where you actually need transportation of goods. You procure the mineral resources from this country, they go to this factory, there's beneficiation, and you supply Transnet and PRASA. Instead of importing these things from China, instead of importing it from Spain, instead of importing it from France. This is a new government. Why can't we do that? So we're missing an industrialization opportunity where you could have given black people for the first time with the advantage of access to market, because there's a captive market of Transnet and PRASA. You are missing the opportunity to empower them. So for me, it's a question of a government that has got no vision on how to reindustrialize this country. We've got front companies like Sufambo now, who are fronting a Spanish...
You've taken us back to where we started, and I want to go to Dr. Fikeni. That's where we started, policy implementation. That's where Mr. Mkhabela has taken us back to. Final word, Dr. Fikeni.
Well, I do think that if ANC were to just freeze and say, let's press a reset button of looking at why implementation has been a problem, but also tackle the changing character of the cadres of the ANC, which is alienating them from the people. And lastly, the issue of corruption is at the very center and reinforces even this factionalism, because it creates an existential crisis when one faction believes it's going to lose out.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. It's been a riveting discussion. I hope we can have these discussions leading to the ANC policy conference. We will be having this week, starting tomorrow, the conference of the SACP. We did not even get to that. We did to many of the other things. To close today's discussion, we take a quote from a 1957 book by Ayn Rand on how accurately he describes South Africa. He says, and I quote, "Money is the barometer of a society's virtue. When you see that trading is done, not by consent, but by compulsion. When you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing. When you see that money is flowing to those who deal not in goods, but in favors. When you see that men get richer by graft and by pool than by work, and your laws don't protect you against them, but protect them against you. When you see corruption being rewarded and honestly becoming a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed." This has been Rights and Recourse. The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the SABC. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. From all of us in the studio, thank you to our guests and goodbye.
Johnny,